You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Thank you for joining me here today on this Training Thursday, which we're going to go through a really interesting topic that I believe affects, I would say, 1 in 4 people, so about 25% of the population. The current medical literature says it affects somewhere between 17 and 20% of the population. So we're pretty close. I'm going by what I see in my clinical practice. And then, of course, we're going by people actually diagnosed with it from conventional-based medicine and in clinical studies. So really, if you don't experience this yourself, or you might experience it sometimes, but not others, most likely someone else in your family or your circle of friends is going through it. And that's why I really wanted to present this show with you today. The interesting thing is that not a lot of conventional medical doctors know about it. Well, I should say not a lot of naturopaths in the medical field in general know about it. And the reason is that it sits in the background, that it is a cause for many types of diseases of the body out there right now, but no one is really diagnosing it in conventional medicine. And again, in natural medicine, what we're looking at it is as a trigger. Like, we're talking about something that triggers a disease-based state. And that's why it's in the middle. So the interesting thing is there's always a root cause. Then there's a middle mediator. That's what we're going to talk about today. I don't even know if we've ever talked about it before. And then there's the final event, essentially, which looks like the disease. And in conventional medicine, of course, they treat the dis-ease, right? They treat exactly what's going on with the body, whatever that symptom is, but they miss the mediator, and they also miss, of course, the root cause. In natural medicine, we try to always work at the root cause. But in the meantime, sometimes it's also nice. Remember, we don't want people to suffer, right? So it's nice as well to be able to remove that suffering as we're fixing the root causes. So what I want to talk about today is a huge reason for inflammation. And the reason I put it on a Training Thursday is that there's a lot of people out there right now that are too fatigued to work out, or they get way too sore from exercising. Their bodies are breaking down too quickly. They're simply exhausted. I'm going to go through a lot of the symptoms. Oh, why don't I go through the symptoms now? So a lot of the symptoms right now, and again, this is why it's on a Training Thursday, have to do with the lack of energy, the low blood pressure, maybe the low blood sugar even, and difficulty focusing, shortness of breath, flushing, or itchy skin when working out. That's another one, or just itchy skin in general, hives, headaches. Some people get headaches when they work out, or again, just headaches during the day. This isn't just with exercise. A few that I experienced, and I went through this myself. This is a lot of my research right now, and I'll talk about that later in the show. But a lot of things that I went through when I experienced this mast cell activation syndrome, which is what we're going to be talking about today, was the mucus, the anxiety, the depression, insomnia, nausea, abdominal pain. I had terrible abdominal pain. I used to get urinary tract infections, and as a male, that's really strange, right? Like, why would you get a urinary tract infection? Well, mine had nothing to do specifically with the bacteria, although I had bacterial-based issues in my gut, but high histamine-based issues, again, which we're going to be talking about. Red eyes, that's something that a lot of people are dealing with, is bloodshot red eyes, itchy eyes, watery eyes. Again, I talked about the difficulty focusing for both children and adults. Gut-based issues, so besides the abdominal pain, a lot of people dealing with loose stool or the nausea that I talked about, bloating, acid reflux, GERD, brain fog. That's another huge one I used to deal with, low blood pressure, muscle pain and weakness, migratory pain that kind of jumps around the body and the joints, as well as any type of overall, I would say POTS. So POTS, which we've spoken about before, myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is like flu-like symptoms, high cholesterol, prostate inflammation in men, endometriosis, the feeling of Lyme disease-based symptoms long after Lyme disease is gone. And so we're going to be talking about these symptoms and much more. And you might say, well, that's a lot of symptoms to be dealing with. And I agree. And again, you're not going to experience all of these because your body moves in certain directions. So for example, my body didn't have the loose stool necessarily, or, once I had the autoimmune issues out of the way, the joint pain, I didn't really have that. So what I did have, though, is more of I don't think that I necessarily had deep depression, but I had a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of insomnia. I had abdominal pain, especially when drinking any type of like alcohol or anything histamine based. I had the bloodshot eyes, the muscle weakness, the high and low blood pressure with the POTS, the flu-like symptoms. So I had all of those things, but again, none of my doctors could figure out what it was. So when we're talking about this chronic inflammatory response syndrome, so again, this is called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, CIRS. That's just general, right? So that means you get inflammation a lot. But you have to ask yourself, why do you have all this inflammation? And one of the reasons is that we have this protective signaling system in our body called the mast cell activation. We'll call it mast cell activation syndrome for today. But essentially, the syndrome just means that this is happening from a chronic response as well. So basically what mast cells are, though, they're totally normal. We should all have them in the body, and they reside all throughout the body, the connective tissue, on your skin, the lining of the digestive reproductive organs, lining of the cardiovascular system, and especially around the nerves. That's important to remember because remember, a lot of the stress that we're dealing with, a lot of the inflammation is like nervous system based, and we're highly inflamed. Well, here's the deal, though. The mast cells totally doing their own job. They're doing exactly what they should. And the problem is when they get a response from the environment, meaning like, okay, there's an invader coming into the body, or we've experienced an invader, even if it's just pollen in the air, then it drives those signals praising the body. It begins to release these things called histamines. And a lot of us know those because of the allergies, the asthma, the migraines, the headaches. But a lot of people don't know that they can cause other issues in the body, such as the brain fog and the anxiety, the other mood issues that I spoke about. Besides histamines, mast cells can produce a lot of chemicals. So they can produce prostaglandins, which are very inflammatory for the body, right? Cytokines, chemokines, interleukins, leukotrienes. And basically, these are all items that are stored inside the cell. Like it's called the cytoplasm of the cell, inside the mast cell. And they're released when the body needs to attack these invaders. That's the best way to put it. So again, you can look at it as a food sensitivity you ate, and you're going to produce these mast cell chemicals. Or it could be the environment, such as molds in the environment, or plastics, or toxins, or environmental estrogens. It could be anything from GMO foods to pesticides on our foods. Like I've spoke about last week, spraying bug spray in your body could release these, because again, bug spray contains DEET, and that's harmful to the body. So all of these things, again, we're never taught this. No one's most likely ever spoken it to you before, and it's a complicated topic, but I'm going to do my best to make this real world and applicable. So you already know a lot of the symptoms that you might be experiencing. Just a quick rundown again: the mucus, the anxiety, depression, insomnia, nausea, abdominal pain, urinary tract infections, red eyes, difficulty focusing, brain fog, shortness of breath, fatigue, flushing of the skin, itchy skin, hives, headaches, any type of gut-based issues, joint pain or muscle pain, and then for more diagnosed-based diseases, anything with like IBS or acid reflux, GERD, multiple sclerosis, lupus, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, myalgic encephalomyelitis, POTS, allergies, migraines, high cholesterol, endometriosis, prostatitis, psoriasis even, any skin issues, for sure that it's what it could be, high and low blood pressure, and interstitial cystitis. So those are a few, but if you look at them, well, what are they all based in? They're all based in chronic inflammation. So really, if you have any type of dis-ease of the body, and what I mean by when I say dis-ease and put it in two words, is that it's not the clinical diagnosis that we've been given, whether it's the rheumatoid arthritis or whatever it is. All we're talking about is the body is at dis-ease. It's not in ease, right? So it's out of ease. And that's what we're talking about when you have a dis-ease, because there's always a root cause. Well, the root cause we're about to get to of why these chemicals are being released from the mast cells. Again, these are normal chemicals of the body. So the body has its own storehouse of chemicals to begin to either fight the invaders or begin to repair cells. So what we're looking at with these mast cells kind of go haywire is why might they be going haywire, right? Why might be they getting so excited and going after the body? Well, here's the deal. Stress-based endogenous, that means inside the body or from outside the body, will increase the production of mast cells, okay? And if there's more mast cells, there's going to be more of a release of these chemicals, and that happens under stress. And the stress could be coming from honestly high cortisol or low cortisol. So I didn't get a lot of my symptoms when I was in high cortisol, because cortisol can actually be a very potent anti-inflammatory, and it can actually quiet a lot of the immune system. That's not necessarily a good thing, right? In the long term, to quiet your immune system is not necessarily a good thing, because eventually your body can crash. So when my body crashed and I had low cortisol and Addison's disease, my histamines were at an all-time high, meaning like back then, this is 20 years ago, my doctors had no idea what was going on. Like I just had massive mast cell excitation. They couldn't even help me. And the reason was that it was, now I know, but I literally only figured this out maybe 6 years ago. Like that's not that long ago. I mean, this is fairly recent for me, is that my mast cells, because your mast cells can produce, like I was talking about before, all different types of chemicals, histamines, interleukins, prostaglandins, cytokines, chemokines, leukotrienes. Well, believe it or not, our bodies are unique, right? Like the same systems happen in everybody's body. I have to just point that out, right? Your body's not so unique that we don't know how it's functioning. But in my body was producing these things called leukotrienes, okay? And leukotrienes was why I had allergies. Literally, I had to leave work for about 2 weeks, no exaggeration, each spring. And it was only about 6 years ago. Like it wasn't fully healed. That was the last thing to really heal. And I couldn't figure it out because I could take powerful antihistamines and I could even take Benadryl and nothing would touch it. Nothing would touch my eyes from just being swollen shut, bright red, like just glass, paper cuts on my eyes, so brutal. And then I'm figuring out, oh, well, this is not a straight histamine-based response. What else could it be? I know it's mast cell-based. I know what it is, but what other kind of chemical? And the chemical was leukotrienes. When I figured that out, I figured out my allergies. I figured out my trigger, right? So then we always go to root cause. And so I continued to work on the root cause, which was for me just continuing to empty my rain barrel. Now, here's some of the other issues, though. I just talked about cortisol. High estrogen can be a trigger for additional inflammation in the body. So by testing your thyroid, adrenal hormone levels, you'll be able to figure that out. Toxins, right? There's a great toxicity test. I talk about that in the rain barrel effect. Do you have a lot of the glyphosate? Do you have a lot of the things like brake dust? You know, if you live in the city, like just all those toxins that you're breathing in, is your body high on those? Like, do you need to do a 21-day detox? Do you need to eliminate these things so your liver can better process these chemicals? What about plastics? You know, how much plastics are you exposed to on a daily basis? Same thing, heavy metals. Like, have you tested your hair tissue mineral analysis yet? Or have you done some other type of heavy metal test to look for that? What about something like yeast overgrowth, right? One of my big issues in the past that just was like recurrent was chronic candida overgrowth. I had small intestinal bacterial overgrowth called SIBO, and I had H. pylori. I had to eliminate those multiple times in order to fully heal my gut. And again, that happened probably like 6-7 years ago. That was fully, right? Because I would like, here's the deal. A lot of functional medicine doctors they try to stay on the cutting edge of what's going on. So I believe that changed for myself and a lot of other people somewhere around, let's say 7-8 years ago, okay? We just had like a rush of great new research and information, and that's what I found. And we were able to really pull together. We were able to use biofilm disruptors. We were able to use the best of the best to remove everything we needed to. We already knew how to seal the gut. This has been known for quite some time. You know, the glutamine, the zinc that I talk about, things like aloe vera, then adding in prebiotics afterwards, but not before, right? So we know those things of how to eventually heal the gut and work with your own body. But what I recommend doing is running the organic acids test. I'll talk about those maybe in a few minutes, but organic acids test, stool test, and a food sensitivity, right? I had to figure out what some of my food sensitivities were too that were aggravating my mast cells, which then created more inflammation. So what I had to do was run the food sensitivity test, you know, from an IgG perspective. I knew what had triggered my hives and those types of things when I immediately ate it, right? But I didn't know it was causing the day or 2 day or 3 day later sensitivity, which is an IgG perspective. I found out that almonds and eggs were triggers for me. And I was like, well, these are really healthy foods. You know, how could those possibly trigger inflammation? Well, it's not about good or bad. It's about what's right for my body. And so what I found out was that when I eliminated almonds, believe it or not, and eggs, which I was sad to see go, you know, I started to feel better, okay? So can I have almonds now? Yes. Can I have eggs now? Yes. But I had to eliminate them for a period of time to allow my immune system calm down and then also improve overall health, meaning like I had to calm down those immune cells, those B cells and everything else that was triggering those responses. Another big thing, let me just talk about a couple more triggers, then I'll talk about how to do the fixes, right? Because a lot of people want to know the fixes on how to decrease this inflammation. A lot of things that I was being exposed to or I already had in my body, which was mold-based toxins and a lot of dust. Like I had the typical allergies, which was the grass, mold, dust, pollen. So what I did was I bought air filters. And again, you can go to stevencabral.com/podcasts and just type in air filter. any keyword at stephencabral.com/podcast, you're going to be able to find an 800. Let's see how many episodes we've done today. Today's episode 860. Is that correct? Yes, 860. So if you go to stephencabral.com/860, you'll see today all of the show notes from today. Again, you can always go to stephencabral.com/podcast. And over the last 860 episodes, you can actually search keywords. So if you type in air filter, you can see that. I bought an air filter for my bedroom. Obviously, I'm there for 8 hours a day. Great to have all the molds and pet danders, like I have a dog, and dust and all that vacuumed out of the air, essentially. That's what an air filter does. And you'll get to see my top picks there. Again, I don't have any stake in any of those companies. They're just great companies, and I do the research, and I say, okay, this is what I use. This is what I'm going to recommend. And that changes. So again, I'm always trying to update that. Now, really trying to remove the food intolerances. So I had to remove the eggs, and I removed the dairy from before, and the gluten, and then the almonds, right? So some random things. And then during the heaviest times of the year, I try to keep the windows closed, although I love keeping the windows open. But just during the trigger times of the year, I would try to keep the windows closed for the pollen. And then, of course, I had to clean up my gut. So those are big things that I had to do. All right, here's other things of how I figured it out. So I did the organic acids test to look for yeast overgrowth, and I looked for my low B vitamins, which I found out were low. I did a stool test to see if I had any parasites. I had no parasites, but I did have H. pylori, and I did have some bacterial overgrowth. Okay, so I had some E. coli overgrowth, so I had to remove that. So I removed the H. pylori, and then I removed the bacterial overgrowth. I removed the candida. Things got phenomenally better, meaning like just overall flatter stomach, no bloating, pain going away. And what else can I say? And then, of course, as I sealed up the gut, then I had less food-based reaction. So that was really important, okay? The next thing I did was I went a low histamine diet. We work with this. And again, there's not a lot of people doing this right now. But if you can find a practitioner locally that knows a lot about histamines and inflammation, you could then, obviously, that's a home run. Like, you'll be doing a great, great work. If you work with us, you believe you have histamine-based issues, well, we can easily provide you with a histamine list. Here's the short of it, though. Like, this is really easy for everyone to get started. Anything that's citrus-based, chocolate-based, teas, believe it or not, teas, and anything smoked, aged, or fermented will drive histamines crazy. So once I figured that out, again, this was a lot of research that I'm literally giving you within a 25-minute show today. This took a decade of research. Like, it just wasn't around 20 years ago. It wasn't. But what I looked at, like, we knew citrus caused histamine-based issues, but again, not in people don't have histamine-based issues. So you're just looking at, it all goes back to the rain barrel effect. It really does. I mean, it honestly does. The more you fill it up, the more then you feel that inflammation. For me, I can have like some nightshades now. I can have some smoked food, some fermented food. No big deal. If I were to go crazy though, then I would fill up the rain barrel and then I would feel the effects, which for me would be like acid reflux and brain fog. And I'd feel like I have a hangover even though I'm not hungover, right? So alcohol obviously goes into the fermented. What would aged foods be? Aged would be like a lot of cheeses. So again, like I could do fine with like a fresh goat cheese, but I could never do well with like an aged cheddar. All of a sudden I would get itchiness in the back of my throat. My eyes would get itchy. I'd get some brain fog. I would get irritability. I'm not a fun person when I eat those foods. So those are triggers for me. I know that they're there. Like my body's totally healed, but it doesn't mean that I do not have inborn triggers for those things. My mother has them to this day. My grandmother had them. Like, so it's not like some of this isn't genetic, but remember, lifestyle, diet, environment. Lifestyle, diet, environment. Go back to, I believe it might have been on episode 846. Check that out. That is why you must know your total toxic load. Okay. Nothing matters if you don't fill up your rain barrel. Like, honestly, you're not going to have all of these diseases. You're not going to have all these genetic manifestations or high cholesterol, any of these things, if you don't fill up your rain barrel. Like, that's the truth. That's the truth of the matter. I didn't even make up the term rain barrel effect. I talk about that in my book. Like, it's just, that is the thing. So if you can keep lowering it, which is what I do, which is why I don't go crazy with cheat meals, which I love the new term flex meal. I don't go crazy with flex meals once a week, maybe twice a week. Because if I were to have them every day, well, I'd be living right now with disease. Like, there's no question about it. That's just the way it works. Some people's bodies are a little bit more sensitive than others. I have just a more sensitive body, most likely. Body feels great. I feel better each and every year. I have more energy than I do now than I ever have at any point in my life. And that includes my teens, that includes my 20s. So that's the bottom line. I mean, again, I just don't want to harp on that, but that's the truth, is that lifestyle, diet, and environment. The problem is we're talking about today some deep things that you may not have heard about before, right? So you might say, well, I'm living a good lifestyle. I'm really healthy and I watch what's in my environment. Well, here's the deal. It can happen years ago. If you don't know that you have yeast overgrowth in your gut, or H. pylori or food sensitivities to healthy foods, right? Almonds, pretty healthy food. Most people would argue you can get a lot of benefit from eggs, especially if they're pasture-based, of course. But no, they weren't good for me, right? So that's what we need to look at. All right. So I lowered my histamine-based foods. I had to do multiple detoxes. I didn't do them all at once, but of course I did a 21-day detox, and then I started doing seasonal detoxes. I really believe that's how ultimately, I was able to lower my toxic load. Of course, it's what I do in my practice with the Dr. Cabral detox. At first, I had to lower my lectin intake because lectins can drive mast cells crazy. But then eventually, I had no problem with them. And then I can do rice, and I can do oats, and I can do things like that, with no problem at all, especially fruits as well. And of course, veggies. I had to lower, and to this day, I still keep them low, but I had to lower my meat intake. And I want to explain why. This gets a little complicated, so I'm not going to get too wild, but I know that 25% of our listeners are health coaches and doctors and acupuncturists and DOs and other naturopathic doctors and MDs. So what I want to do is teach a little bit here, because here's the deal. There is arachidonic acid in meat and even some nuts, and so that's why I didn't do great with nuts and meats in general. But with arachidonic acid, it's actually a direct precursor. So arachidonic acid can not only be stimulated by whatever the environmental trigger is, but also it's a producer of leukotrienes. So lo and behold, the more meat I ate or the more nuts I ate in some cases, the more leukotrienes I experienced. And again, I was eating grass-fed meats and all these different types of things. It doesn't mean that there's still not a decent level of arachidonic acid in those. So what happened was I started producing more mast cells. My mast cells were in high overload. For one, is that my gut was a mess. I had SIBO and I had yeast overgrowth. And so for that reason, my body also was not producing the enzymes to degrade mast cells naturally, or histamines naturally, I should say, right? So I had a lot of histamine production. And in your gut, if your gut is functioning well, you're producing this thing called diamine oxidase. And diamine oxidase is a natural enzyme. Our body always produces the enzyme to degrade the natural substance that our body produces. So let me repeat that in a different way. Our body will always produce the thing to calm down the response in our body if our body is in a natural cycle. But when you have yeast overgrowth in the gut, which I did, and when you had bacterial overgrowth in your gut, so I had this gut dysbiosis, this IBS, all of these different things, well, my body couldn't naturally produce the enzyme to calm down the issues of the higher histamines, or in this case, leukotrienes. So really interesting, because I was wondering, why am I always producing mucus? My body's always producing mucus. I've got postnasal drip. I've got mucus. I'm always clearing my throat. I've got difficulty taking in a deep breath because I had this basically bronchoconstriction so basically low-grade bronchitis. You're just kind of dealing with allergic-based issues in your lungs. They're always inflamed. And again, even a lot of the best lung specialists, pulmonologists, don't even look at these types of things. And the problem is, it's not their fault. This is not taught, not taught to this level. And I think that it needs to be. And the problem is that you really, as a health practitioner, need to take a half hour or more, if possible, of your day to continue to do research, just to continue to listen to maybe podcasts like this or other podcasts, or read books, or go deep on a specific topic. Right now, I'm about to share with you things that work, but right now, it's been a while, but I'm in the process of actually creating a natural product, a natural-based nutritional supplement that works on Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, functional medicine, to naturally block a lot of this mast cell chemical production. Now, remember, we're always working on the root cause, because you want the symptoms to be there, right? You want to know that there's inflammation because your body's not balanced. You don't want to mask those. But here's the deal. I just gave you how to figure it out, meaning food imbalances, right? Hormone imbalances, looking at toxicity, right? Looking at gut-based imbalances, H. pylori, candida, SIBO, all of those things. Another one, which I didn't mention, is high omega-6s. Now, that goes along with the arachidonic acid. But if you were to look at high omega-6s to omega-3s, and you're really not a 3-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, that's an easy fix that can do a world of wonder. It did a world of wonder for me. I'm sure it can help you as well. And then heavy metals. If you have heavy metals, okay, you're going to eliminate those. That's going to take 6 weeks, right? Fixing the gut's going to take 12 weeks. Not the end of the world. Not that big a deal. You'll be able to fix it. Same with the omega-3s. Somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks. 12 weeks for it to get to stick, in the next set. But what about getting rid of it right away? So that's what I want to be able to help people in my practice. Here's the thing. I'm not going to hold any patents. I'm not going to do any of those things. My job is to share this with the world. If someone could take the product that I make and make it even better, then fantastic. No issues at all with that. Honestly, no issues at all. But I'm going to work on, because here's the reason. Why do I make a product by Equilibrium Nutrition? Why do I formulate it? Because there isn't one out there right now. That's it. There's so many products. We probably make I don't even know because I don't count. Like there's no rhyme or reason, why I would count. But let's say we make 20 products, okay? It's because those 20 products don't exist. Now there's 1,000 different types of nutritional supplements on the market. And we talk about all of those very freely on the Cabral concept. And I use them in my concierge practice all the time. But there isn't one right now that I know that works great for mast cell inhibition or mast cell aggravation. So in the short term, and for people with chronic mast cell activation, or if you have this thing which I'm prone to, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome, so did my mom. My mom has it right now, meaning not aggravated, but it comes about, especially if she's not living, the healthiest lifestyle or eating the healthiest foods or doing more stress, more flex meals, more whatever. And I know that my grandmother had it, and so I just look at genetics and, what if one of my daughters has it? So this is trying to pass it on generationally, meaning that these are natural things. And I just want to share them with you now because I just have to let you know that there is a fix for everything. Anything that your doctor has told you, oh, well, that's just genetic and you're going to have to be on this medication. Fine. Listen to why you have it, but don't let that be your destiny, right? That is not your destiny. There's always a fix. Remember, I've been studying natural health for over 20 years. I didn't know how to fix the whole mast cell thing till, let's say, 7 years ago, okay? So just to let you know, some things take a little longer than others, but there's always a fix. Meaning so here's the example. 20 years ago, when I knew a lot about nutritional supplements, I was getting exercise, I was getting nutrition, great. So that was one level. And then I studied low histamines, then I studied anti-inflammatory, and I studied which foods had, arachidonic acid, which ones didn't. Okay, so I knew that, and I was working on it, but I still didn't, and my doctors didn't know either, that the mast cell issue I was dealing with was not the prostaglandins, it was not really the specific chemokines, it wasn't cytokines, it wasn't interleukins, it was leukotrienes, right? So it's you have to find the needle in the haystack, but you can find it. You can find it. And the last thing that I had to work on was 2 weeks of the year. My body's super healthy, felt phenomenal. But for 2 weeks of the year in early spring, before you could even see the buds on the trees, my allergies would go crazy. And I'm like, how can this be? I'm doing this, this, and this. And then I figure it out. And then it's all gone. So remember, there's always an answer. There is always an answer. And you just have to keep searching. That's the bottom line. So I want to give you what I'm doing right now. And you can begin to do a lot of these things as well. So what I do, especially during that early spring, is that I'm using some Ayurvedic and traditional Chinese medicine remedies, right? These are herbal based. So I'm using things like quercetin, right? Amazing antihistamine. I'm using watercress. A lot of people don't know that about watercress, berberine, andrographis, ginger. So in the past, I could never do ginger. Just a little note on that. It gave me heartburn. It gave me acid reflux. It was not good for my body. It gave me itchy eyes. So ginger did not work for me. Now it does. So you always have to figure out what works for your body. So even though I'm saying, hey, this is great, it may not work for you. That's the thing. But we also have a lot of other great things. Berberine works great for my body, right? Another one that's being studied right now in terms of as an antihistamine would be tarragon. So that's another interesting one as well that we're looking into. And I'm looking into the research myself. Now, that I combine the best of Eastern medicine and with the best of Western. So I'm looking at state-of-the-art things now. So a lot of people say, no, I only want to do it by food and herbs. Well, fine, I just gave you a lot of those herbs. But I say, why don't use the best of everything? So vitamin C, zinc, vitamin B6, omega-3s, and glutamine, absolutely phenomenal. And that's what I'm using as well. So what I'm doing is I'm working on the exact dosages based on research, based on science, and I'm going to create the ultimate mast cell based product. I really believe that. And again, if someone copies it, someone does whatever, totally fine. But what I'm going to do is make sure that it comes from third-party tested, organic or wild crafted. So there's no pesticides. Because remember, pesticides on your herbs or pesticides on your food or any of those things can drive mast cells crazy, right? Because all the mast cells are is signaling stations, right? And then they produce chemicals that then create inflammation in your body. But it's doing that on purpose, meaning you got a chemical into your body. Now your body's trying to fight that. So it's never messing up. Your body is never messing up. What you need to do is keep, again, lowering toxic load. We talked about that, and that's why I gave you that episode. If you didn't tune into that show, go back to episode 846, stephencabral.com/846 to check that out. So the other thing that I'm studying are specific probiotic strains as well that helps with cutting down histamine-based production and mast cell activation. I know this show was a little heavy. Sometimes I like to do that. I don't know. Let me know if it worked for you. Go to Instagram and just type in my name, Stephen Cabral. If today's show was helpful, let me know. I did this as much for you so that you understand there's always a reason why And then you can always figure it out by doing the lab test. So a lot of these lab tests I named today were I call them the Big Five, Dr. Cabral Big Five lab test. And of course, if you can't afford all those lab tests, I totally understand. I always want to be respectful and understanding of the finances involved in functional medicine testing. But maybe if you're having more gut-based issues, you could run an organic acids test, right? That might be the first place to start. Or maybe a food sensitivity test. But I like to look even deeper at the organic acid test, the stool test, and then of course, if you can, run the food sensitivity test. You could maybe run a hair tissue mineral analysis, an omega-6 to omega-3 test. But if you're ever looking for a place to get started, I'm telling you right now, the organic acids test, which looks at gut function, candida overgrowth, C. diff, it looks at B vitamins, and the hair tissue mineral analysis that looks at heavy metals, and it looks at your electrolyte stress, and it looks at copper to zinc ratios. Amazing test. I call that the starter kit. That's probably where I get started for most people. It's in the grand scheme of things to figure out what's going in your body, fairly inexpensive. I know nothing's cheap. I'm not saying that. But these are things that give you quantifiable data. And that data actually says, hey, start here, fix this. You're going to start to feel a whole lot better. So again, if you or anyone you know that you love, that you care about, is dealing with some type of chronic inflammation response, it may be coming from mast cell activation syndrome. It's something that I dealt with for many, many years. We're talking like 15 years. And it wore my body down. That's basically what it did. Now it's all gone. I have more energy than ever. I can work out again without feeling inflamed the next day. Like all these great things. I could talk about this for hours. I probably will one day. And of course, I'll teach this more in my upcoming certifications and seminars this fall. But hopefully this was helpful. Let me know. And I'm happy to do more in-depth shows like this in the future. Take care, everyone. And as always, please do feel free to share this show with anyone it could help.
Are you ready to heal yourself and then go on to heal others? If so, the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute can help you discover proven functional medicine protocols that blend the best of 7 different healing disciplines from around the world. I personally share with you the exact handouts and protocols I use in my private practice that enable people to get well, lose the weight, and live longer, stronger. I want to pass this information on to the next generation of health coaches, and that is exactly why I created IHP. We are the future of the health coaching industry, and the skills and knowledge you will learn will make you an in-demand certified health coach anywhere in the world. Although we have many medical professionals taking the IHP certifications, no experience is necessary, and half our members have no previous health certifications. At the Integrative Health Practitioner Institute, our motto is a health coach in every home. Our goal is that you take this knowledge and then share it with family, friends, loved ones, your community, or in a practice where you create a career you love and can be proud of. The global IHP community is filled with some of the most kind and caring people in the world, and we can't wait to welcome you into our world soon. For more information or to set up a discovery call with one of our IHP Health Coach graduates, simply head over to integrativehealthpractitioner.org.